Our gospel lesson continues our journey through the book of Luke. Today it's chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrite! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things he was doing. Tomorrow is the first day of school for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County public school system. There will be school buses on the road, so please pay attention to those flashing lights. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to see the buses letting the kids out at their various schools. I always love to watch the kids as they get off the buses, especially on the first day of school. I see a lot of energy and hope for the new school year. Even the kids who say they hate school carry a little bit of hope for that new start. Really, from an outsider's point of view, they all pretty much look fine. Heads held high, bodies moving freely, the little ones are sometimes skipping. You can't see the burdens that some of them are carrying into school on that first day. You can't tell which children are all but crippled by the lives of the adults around them. You couldn't have seen it looking at Harley Patrick when she was a 3rd grader in Virginia. But Harley, who is now a high school student, remembers. In a recording for the National StoryCorps project, she says this: "I didn't have the best home life. My dad wasn't really in the picture, and Mom was doing things that nobody was proud of, like drugs. One of the most difficult things when I was young was my mom getting locked up. Her not being there was like, what do we do?" What Harley did was all she could do. She told a teacher. Kate Music, her 3rd grade teacher, sat down one day in the hallway to listen to Harley's story. "My heart literally was breaking in that hallway," Music says to Harley. "And there was nothing more that I wanted to do than to protect you. And I really tried to figure out a way to help you realize that what you were witnessing was not your fault, and that we were there to help you, always." That was a life-changing conversation for Harley. It offered her freedom, liberating her from the shame she felt because she thought, as children will, that the terrible things going on in the adult lives around her were her fault. And it offered her the promise that someone could guide her to safe places, the reassuring message that the adults in her school at least were there to help her. That was a brand new idea. And as she began to test it, she found that it was true. Sooner or later, she said, "I noticed that there's people who care. It's one of the best feelings you could ever have when you're going through rough times at home." Tiara Jackson might also have looked fine. Children can be very good at masking their burdens and their pain, especially when they think their survival depends upon it. The Chicago school officials who chided 14-year-old Tiara for chronic lateness didn't know that she was homeless. With her mother in and out of prison, She was living in a single room in a homeless shelter with her aunt and 6 cousins. And the hour-and-a-half bus ride to school meant that she was always late, but she didn't want to tell anyone why. Finally, her aunt wrote a note for her to give to her teacher to explain the situation. The day after receiving the note, the teacher brought Tiara a bag of supplies. I didn't know how to accept it, Tiara says in her StoryCorps recording. But after that, she never treated me differently, and I think that's one of the things I appreciated. I knew that I'm intelligent, you know. I have a brain with thoughts that matter. Tiara went on to Roosevelt University to major in international studies and minor in economics. Oh, the power of a teacher to liberate. The power to free a human being from shame. The power to lift up a bowed head. The power to set the captive free. Now, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. Oh, the power of a teacher to liberate. With the school year upon us, when I think of that woman in the synagogue, I think of Harley and Tiara and all the other students beginning the school year with burdens that we cannot imagine. You know, it's astonishing that the psychic wounds of family dysfunction are not visible to the naked eye. It's amazing that these wounded children are not physically bent double like this woman in Luke, bent down and down until all they can see is the dirt beneath their feet. How was the woman in the synagogue like Harley Patrick? We don't know anything about the woman's background. The Greek text says she had a spirit of infirmity or a spirit of weakness for 18 years. It is Jesus who names the spirit when he says that the woman has been bound by Satan. I think of the evil in 8-year-old Harley's life. Drugs and all that goes with drug abuse, evil that constrained the life of a blameless child and crippled her with undeserved shame. Come to think of it, we don't know the age of the woman in the synagogue. Maybe she's just 18. Maybe her whole childhood was like Harley's and it's left her bent double at 18 years old, quite unable to raise her eyes to see a future. How was the woman in the synagogue like Tiara? I think of the woman's struggles to get to the synagogue, how difficult that must have been for her when she could not even raise her head to see where to put her feet from one step to the next. Yet she persevered. Why? Maybe because the synagogue was the only place she found peace and hope and teaching. Physically disabled as she was, the woman still came to the synagogue to learn something. In the worst of circumstances, it's empowering to know, as Tiara discovered, that you have a brain with thoughts that matter. That's worth a hard walk to the synagogue week after week. That is worth a 90-minute bus ride twice a day, every day. How was the woman's experience in the synagogue like what happened to Harley and Tiara? I think it begins with the fact that somebody saw her. She didn't come looking for Jesus to heal her, but he sees her. The Greek text here includes a word, idu, that the King James usually translated as lo or behold. Here's King James. And he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman. The narrator who cries, "Behold," is showing you the woman through Jesus' eyes. She appears suddenly like a meteor on his horizon. She's suddenly all he can see. And in his intense focus, he truly sees her, understanding her pain and her need. By truly seeing her, he enters into authentic relationship that creates a space for healing. And into that space, he extends a blessing, a promise, a lifeline. Woman, you are set free from your ailment. This promise he confirms with a touch, and immediately she stands facing him, facing the world, raising her eyes to heaven and praising God. How wonderful that Jesus, the teacher, has this power to liberate, even though she came on the wrong day. Or so says the leader of the synagogue. Now, if you pressed him on this, that leader would insist he has no objection to that woman's being healed. He's no doubt perfectly willing, even eager, for her to be healed, but he has a job to do. He is entrusted with upholding the law, and in faithfulness to that trust, he is protecting Sabbath observance. So he turns to the crowd, and he says, there are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day. There's a sense in the Greek verb that he may have said this to the crowd over and over. That's why the NRSV says he kept saying it, which suggests the air of a politician hammering on a talking point. After all, he's not speaking to the woman. He's not even speaking to Jesus. He's speaking to the crowd. So evidently it's their reaction to this healing that worries him. He seems to be trying to get out in front of this event. Maybe he's worried less about holiness than he is about crowd control. The law is the foundation of societal order. What would it do to that order if scores of sick and hurting people showed up at the synagogue on the wrong day to be healed? And what would disorder say about his authority? So he hammers home his message. There's already plenty of time in the schedule for healing, but not today. Today is not the right day. Tempting though it may be, I don't think we can write this fellow off as the force of evil. He does have a job to do. He has been entrusted with leadership in his society. Part of his job is to draw lines, right day, wrong day. Jesus understands his point, and Jesus does not call him evil, but Jesus does call him a hypocrite. I've been pondering the meaning of hypocrite. It's defined as an actor or a dissembler, one who professes belief in a moral principle but then acts in a different way. The Greek roots are hypo, meaning under, and krinein, meaning to distinguish or separate. And I wonder, is a hypocrite an under-distinguisher? Maybe this leader's problem is that his interpretation of the law does not go deep enough. He sees the distinctions that branch off the law, but not the root from which the law grows. The root of the Sabbath is not control, but liberation. Jesus' reply to the synagogue leader concentrates on images of things untied and tied, bound and unbound. Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from bondage on the Sabbath day? The Sabbath is a foretaste of the final and complete liberation that will come in the full realization of the kingdom when all the world is in right relationship with God. The healing that takes place in this story is a divine example of what can happen in right relationship. Bowed heads are lifted. Crippling shame falls away. Eyes focus forward and see the hope that lies ahead. Interestingly, Jesus does not say that this woman's faith has made her whole. Her healing depends not on faith but on relationship. A relationship in which Jesus, the teacher, truly sees this woman who has come to learn something. This is the space in which healing happens. I believe that all over this country are teachers like the ones who helped Harley and Tiara. Teachers who take the time to truly see their students. True seeing creates authentic relationships. The work of teachers can be a model for how God works, seeing us truly, and creating authentic relationships in which healing happens, in which liberation happens. In the space of relationship, what happens can be as simple and as life-changing as the example Jesus uses of untying the ox and leading it to water. A teacher can offer freedom, loosening the ties that have bound the child to a broken and dysfunctional environment. And a teacher can guide a child to the life-giving refreshment of education. Oh, the power! But this liberating work can happen only when teachers have the opportunity to see their students truly. Sometimes that opportunity is hard to find. It's hard if the people we have trusted to lead our society wind up standing in the way, declaring that it's not the right day. The economy's bad. It's not the right day to invest in our teachers. Accountability is everything. It's not the right day for successes that cannot be measured on standardized tests. Surely structures are already in place to take care of student needs. Today is just not the right day. Not the right day for teachers to see the students. Not the right day for authentic relationship. Not the right day for liberation. I worry when those we have entrusted with leadership, even when they are trying to be faithful to that trust, may sometimes be under-distinguishing. We have placed much in their care. Does their care reach down to the roots? When they care for our schools and teachers, do they look deeply enough to see that education, like the Sabbath, is rooted in liberation? If they miss this root of truth, they miss all the truths branching upward from it. That liberation depends on authentic relationship. That authentic relationship depends on true seeing. And that anything standing in the way of teachers truly seeing their students hinders the teacher's potential to do godly work. Every obstacle to true seeing leaves another student bent double, staring at the ground. Thank God that the calling to teach is so powerful that people continue to respond even when they're told today's not the right day. They respond because they know what Jesus, the teacher, knew, that every day is the right day for liberation in the kingdom of God, and that liberation can come from relationships created in teaching. Now bear with me for just one more story from the StoryCorps project. This one concerns a young man named Ayudeji Oguniyi. His family came to Chicago from Nigeria when he was just a child. His father drove a cab but hoped his son would become a doctor. But while Oguniyi was in college as a pre-med student, his father was murdered on the job. And the three murderers were as young as Oguniyi himself, 18, 19, 22. Oguniyi says he kept asking himself, what happens to a person? Where do they get lost to become murderers? Thinking again of the woman in the synagogue, we might ask the question this way: at what point do damaged children become so bowed down that they can no longer see the path to hope? At the time of his father's death, Oguniyi had been tutoring teenagers who came from homes not unlike the homes of those murderers. Sometime after the murder, when the class was reading aloud, a 16-year-old student stormed out in a rage. I went out to talk to him, says Oguniyi, and he just broke down. He said, "It's hard for me to read." There are many people that cry because they're hurt, they've been neglected, but to cry because you couldn't read, he says, that spoke volumes to me. Oguniyi helped the boy get into special programs, and he began to read. It was just like this gift that money can't buy for him, says Oguniyi, and that gift was not just to the student, but to the teacher. By me giving that to him, he says, I totally forgot about the pain of the murder, and I wanted to continue to give more of what I had, to heal. It just dawned on me. Everybody at some point sits in a classroom. That could be the foundation for everything else. So that's when I said that whatever happened to my father is not going to be in vain. I'm going to follow my heart and become a teacher. And he did. Now, some might have questioned Oguniyi's decision. Are you sure you want to become a teacher now? Look at how hard the job is today. Look at how little society values teachers. Or just look what happened to your father. Why would you want to work with students from that neighborhood? There are other ways to help children. There are plenty of structures in place, but today is not the right day for you to do this. But it was the right day. It is the right day. Every day is the day for liberation as the kingdom of God breaks into our world. Thank God for the power of the teacher to liberate. In the name of the one teacher who came to liberate the world, we say, thank God. Amen.